Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. Imagine coming home from a peaceful vacation to find your property getting bulldozed, your garden destroyed, your shed demolished. All because you refused to join the HOA. The HOA president thought I was just another helpless victim who would not fight back. Oh boy, was she wrong about that. Let's dive right into the story. So I've worked as a police officer within the Philippines for years, living right in the center of Quezon City. This city is constantly bustling and certainly never sleeps. Some people thrive in that sort of atmosphere, and I'll admit that I did too for a while. However, after so many years in such a setting, it tends to get quite tiring. Around a year ago, I decided to move into a more rural setting, choosing a town about 30-minute commute from the city. I decided the journey into work each day would be worth it for peace and quiet I would come home to. I had been saving up for some time and so ended up being able to afford to purchase a small patch of land with a quaint little home right in the center. It's nothing incredible, but it's certainly what I needed. I had done plenty of research into the town I was moving to, but there was very little on the internet about the woman or the homeowner association that I will be discussing here. I later realized that this is likely due to the locals fearing this organization and what they might be capable of. Upon moving to the town, it quickly became apparent that the community is tight-knit. Everyone seemed to know each other, and for a while it did feel like I was an outsider. Most people approached me and began integrating me into the community, a community which I'm now firmly settled in. I trade produce with some neighbors, have meals with others, and sometimes just sit and chat with them. However, others were not so friendly, especially one woman who I'll be referring to as Karen. I would first like to note that I take excellent care of my property. My garden is my pride and joy, and I've dedicated hundreds of hours to maintaining it. I was not able to have a garden in the city, so I like to take advantage of it here. I also grow a few crops and have a small coop with 3 chickens. The eggs are delicious, by the way. Near this farmland is a small shed that I built, which my neighbors have been fawning over since I finished it. I'm mentioning all this to make sure you're aware that I care for my land. It is in no way an eyesore or indicative of any antisocial behavior. Around this town is a homeowners association group which technically my property falls just outside of, so I'm under no obligations to adhere to their rules. I don't tend to interact with this HOA, only the neighbors that reside within it. Said neighbors, though, are more than happy to tell me of how controlling and toxic this homeowner organization is and that they've been trying for years to abolish it. Given their experiences, I know it would not be in my best interest to join. A few months after I moved into this new property, I began getting letters from this HOA. The first few welcomed me to the neighborhood and informed me of community events taking place that I could join, nothing harmless. However, shortly after, the letters began suggesting that I join the organization, claiming I'd be rewarded by being a more integrated member of the community. These letters were from the president herself, Karen. I replied to one, politely declining the offer to join and claiming I had no intention to do so, but that I'd be more than happy to make sure my property remains tidy. The letters began getting worse, claiming I needed to join and that otherwise I'd be ostracized from the community for lack of integration. That last one was just ridiculous. I was already more than integrated. Yeah, I would not join if I were you, one of my neighbors stated after I told them about the letters. They tried to get the last people who lived in your home to join, but they refused. It's actually why they moved out. Because of pressure from the HOA? I replied. My neighbor nodded. You'd be surprised how pressuring they can get, especially the president. Don't be afraid to be firm. It was good to get the warning, as it meant I was already slightly more resilient to any of their measures, knowing they were not personal, and this is just how the HOA acts. One afternoon, I remember being out shopping at our local market when Karen approached me. Hello, you must be Gabriel. I'm Karen, your HOA president. It didn't slip past me that she referred to the HOA as if I was part of it. That's me, nice to meet you. We awkwardly shook hands. We exchanged a bit of small talk while walking down the market. She did not seem as controlling as everyone made her out to be, however, I'd been warned that this was most likely an act. After a while she asked, So, when will you be joining the HOA? Oh, I won't be, sorry. I replied confused as I had most definitely stated this in my letters. Her mood changed. So the letters were not a mistake. I shook my head, leading her to going on a rant about what an amazing opportunity this was, that it was not every day they asked people to join. I of course know that they'd been badgering the previous owners of my house already, so I knew this was a lie. She again mentioned things about how integrated I would be in the community. She stated the HOA was relaxed and there was few rules. However, when I asked to see a handbook of the rules, she claimed only HOA members had access. I asked this because I had a feeling she would not want to show me. Well, I'd already been shown all the rules by my neighbor, and they are very extensive and get added to by the week, it seems. They can barely have any say in their property, and they might as well be renting. Look, I'm under no obligation to join the HOA, so I won't be, I stated firmly. Karen looked like she was about to retort, but then seemed to notice that we had some onlookers, so instead smiled and walked away. That won't be the end of that. The man behind the fruit stand spoke, giving me a sympathetic smile. Well, that's all everyone seems to be telling me, I chuckled. But deep down, I was beginning to dread whatever was to come. I came to this town for a quiet life, not for some organization to disrupt my peace and make me feel like I was back in the city. I wish I could say this was the last time I had to deal with Karen, but it was not. She left me alone for 2 weeks before beginning her ambush again. She continued with her letters and never failed to stop me in the street if she happened to see me. I kept turning down her offers, of course, kept reminding her that I wanted nothing to do with this HOA. Eventually, she began coming to my house, which started to make the whole ordeal feel much more personal. I don't know why she wouldn't just leave me alone. "This property is a hazard to the community," she screamed one afternoon. "Karen, please just stop this harassment. You know there are no hazards here. It is an eyesore. Just join the HOA and help me fix it," she pleaded. This was outside of my home where my neighbors were looking on in sympathy. I told them previously that they shouldn't feel the need to intervene. I could handle her on my own and I didn't want her wrath being turned on them. A couple of weeks later though, and I decided I needed to get away for a while. It was a shame that I felt the need to escape my own new peaceful life for more peace, but that was just a situation I had to deal with. It was also a relatively quiet month for crime, so I didn't have much work to do. So off I went to the coast for a week to chill out in the hopes that when I came back, things would have settled. I'd asked my neighbor to keep an eye on my property while I was gone, and said neighbor also took my chickens into his own coop for minding. On the 6th day of my vacation, my neighbor messaged me that something had happened. I honestly thought he might have been winding me up, but when I returned home the following day, I saw that he was not lying. What is this thing, you might be wondering? Well, my home was gone. It had been demolished overnight. My neighbor heard a commotion and could only watch as a bulldozer rammed into my beautiful home and garden. I didn't know what to do, so I just broke down into tears surrounded by the rubble of what was once my garden. A few of my other neighbors came out to shed some more light into the situation. One told me that she had heard Karen saying to others around town that I didn't have it in me to retaliate, and that I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. I would like to establish that my actual house remained standing, however, my garden, shed and rest of the property was completely screwed up. My neighbor claimed that Karen stated the demolition was done for community beautification, which was just a load of lies in my opinion, considering how unsightly the land now was. I was furious. I couldn't believe she would go this far just to get her way. I also couldn't believe she thought I wouldn't do anything about it. Clearly, she did not know that I was a police officer. I decided my best course of action would be to stay calm and gather as much info as possible. Well, I headed over to the neighbor who'd been watching my property and who messaged me about the bulldozing. It was crazy. I heard some commotion in the middle of the night and looked out to see a team of demolition men destroying part of your property with a bulldozer. Karen was overseeing the whole thing, and when I ran out to stop what was happening, she claimed she wanted to teach you a lesson. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Well, I could, but still could not grasp that Karen would do something like this. I thanked my neighbor for his efforts in stopping Karen. My next task was to meticulously report all the damage made, taking photos and collecting evidence of everything. I also headed into the town hall to get the property records for my home and confirm that my land is outside of the jurisdiction of the HOA. A few days later was the next community meeting. I usually don't attend these because quite frankly they are boring and feel like a lecture, but also I wouldn't want to face Karen more than I had to. However, today I went. Karen was smirking at me when I arrived, which boiled my blood, but I managed to suppress it. "Nice of you to join. You know, it's usually only HOA members who are allowed here," she quipped. "Nope, there's no law stating that and you're just making more rules up." I shrugged and sat down. She glared at me from her seat. Did she just expect me to sit back and take whatever comments she threw my way? At the end of the meeting, after the usual items on the agenda had been run through, the mayor asked if there was anything else people would like to mention. I raised my hand and headed to the front. Well, I would like to just make you all aware of what happened a few nights ago. I started before sharing the full story of what Karen had done to my property. Everyone was shocked, especially when I lifted the images of my now destroyed land. I expected Karen to be beyond embarrassed, maybe even run out of the room, but instead all she did was begin slow clapping. What was this supposed to do? Intimidate me? I was simply removing the hazards, she shrugged. I didn't even know what to say. Did she not care that everybody now knew what she had done? She even had the nerve to begin chuckling to herself. I looked over at the mayor, who was nervously twitching at his stand. I raised an eyebrow at him, wondering why he didn't care about what Karen just admitted to. Karen, do you have any legal documentation to back up the supposed authority you have to destroy my land? I asked her, cold and calculated. Karen simply smiled and stated, "Nope," popping the P. Thank you. I smiled and walked to sit back down. That was all the info I needed. As I sat down, the person beside me informed me that the mayor was her brother, which explains his lack of concern. It also explains why this tyrant has been able to run this town for so long. Karen and the mayor's dismissal of the attack of my home confirms that they have no idea that I'm a police officer and that I know the law inside and out. I went into my own police district the following day and filed the report myself. With the help of my supervisor, who was making sure my case looked as strong as possible, by the time I was finished it would be impossible for her to avoid a sentence. The report was filed for trespassing, destruction of private property, criminal misconduct and antisocial behavior. I also managed to get the construction company to provide witness statements and all the receipts used in the transaction. There was more than enough evidence that Karen had wanted all of this to happen. Once this report was filed, I pressed forward to have the case filed as a criminal complaint and to begin the procedure to produce a civil suit. I also reached out to a local media group in town to share the story. They of course jumped on it immediately and arranged an interview. After this interview, I made sure they knew to wait until my go-ahead to release the video. I decided to keep everything to myself for a while. I sort of wanted to see how far Karen would go, what she would do next now that she thought she had won. "Clean up your garden," she told me one afternoon at the market. "It's a shame what happened, but it really is an eyesore." Okay. I smiled and carried on walking. "You're seriously gonna leave it like that?" "Well, you destroyed it for no reason. Clearly this is better than it was before, so I see no reason to change it." I shrugged. "You have to." "Nope, I don't. I'm not part of your HOA. It's funny, maybe I would have joined up until you bulldozed my lawn." "You would have joined?" Karen seethed. I nodded. Obviously, I would not have joined, but why not have some fun with this? She ended up following me around the market for a good half an hour, gloating about what she had done while also trying to get me to join. She ended up going to threats, claiming she would destroy the rest of my property if I didn't sign over to the HOA. I don't know why she thought it would work. After a couple of weeks of leaving my garden a tip, which was killing me inside, Karen ended up hiring landscapers to come over and sort it out. Technically, this was another illegal act on her behalf, more trespassing and meddling with my property. However, I did not half mind these people sorting out my garden on her dime. She would come over in the middle of the night to check on progress. She did this so frequently to the point that I had to install cameras, and I wasn't sure what her next move would be. Once my whole lawn was fully sorted out, well-ish, it still was not back to its glory days, and the shed was nowhere to be seen. She restarted her onslaught of letters. This time they were threatening, informing me that I needed to join the HOA or they would destroy my home, as she claimed at the market. I didn't care, I didn't bother replying. However, this is when I suddenly got my plan on how I can get revenge. The next time I saw Karen at the market, I said I would join the HOA. She was suspicious at first, but I assured her I was being serious, that I knew this would be a good idea, and I told her how sorry I was for causing such a hassle, and that I would be a new, invaluable member to the community. She smirked, told me something about how she knew I would change my mind, and sauntered off with an extra skip in her step. Now that I'd agreed to become a member of the HOA, I was invited to the next committee meeting to sign the papers, just what I wanted. I sat through the entire meeting, listening to all the stupid rules Karen was implementing. After that was done, I stood on the platform and began my speech. It was similar to the one I gave at the community meeting, however, this time I backed it with more evidence. And lastly, played the interview video, which was published just prior to the meeting. Karen rolled her eyes, still looking two-faced. "This still is not gonna do anything," she scoffed. "You have no power here, never will." I smirked and walked over to her. Karen, you have the right to remain silent. I began slowly. She raised her eyebrows in confusion, and so I continued, anything you can say can and will be used against you. She scoffed, what are you doing? I simply smiled back and lifted up my police badge. You are under arrest. She froze for a second. It looked like she was gonna retort with one of her usual lines, but she said nothing. She inspected the badge, clearly trying to see if it was fake and realizing it was not. You cannot do this, she yelled before trying to get the rest of her committee to back her up. They did not though. In fact, some of them began speaking up about how she was finally getting what she deserved. You are under arrest for trespassing and vandalism of private property, antisocial behavior, and harassment. I can handcuff you if you want, but I'd much rather you just come with me in peace, I stated. Karen continued her rant, her face going red as everyone around her turned against her. She eventually agreed to come with me after sticking up her nose and uttering a, "The mayor will sort this out." I'd already considered her relation to the mayor and so brought her to a precinct outside of his jurisdiction. She realized this once we got out of the car and began panicking again, asking that I take her to the precinct inside of the town. I of course declined this suggestion. Although the arrest was easy and immediate, I still wanted to make claims for all the damages, and so the case ended up in court. The mayor was there and tried his very best to defend her. However, the judge kept pointing out that she's already guilty of the crime and has admitted as such, and so any defense only looks negatively on him. You don't understand, he was not adhering to the HOA guidelines. He built a shed. Karen wailed from the stand. The judge just sighed. This had been going back and forth for hours. He is not part of the HOA, so cannot break any rules. Even if he was, being in an HOA does not give any of the committee the right to vandalize and destroy property. The fact you don't know this is concerning. Karen didn't like this response and worsened her case by fighting back at the judge and calling her all sorts of names. In the end, Karen was fined $10,000 to pay me directly for the damages, and the HOA itself was fined with $5,000. The judge also called for a complete revamp of the HOA, calling for there to be more regular checks with the community to understand their views of the organization. Along with the 5 years in prison, Karen was banned from ever gaining another significant role in any HOA. A few weeks later, and things were already looking much better, everyone in the community was thrilled to have Karen gone and were thanking me for what I did. The HOA fell under new management by none other than my very own neighbor, who is already doing a much better job than Karen ever could. I filed another report on the mayor, whose corruption needed to be addressed. Given his behavior at court the other day, it was quickly decided that a new mayor would be needed, and elections are set to take place in a few weeks' time. With the money I won from the case, I've been able to begin rebuilding my garden and my shed, as well as upgrading my chicken coop so my 3 chickens would have more space to roam. I was finally achieving the peaceful life I had so desperately sought out. Edit: I think I haven't made this clear in my post before because some commenters were confused. There was both a civil as well as a criminal suit against Karen. She obviously didn't look good in both of them, hence why she had to pay me money and went behind bars for what she did. Either way, I'm glad this is all over, and the best suggestion I can give you is the following: never join an HOA. And the next one is titled, "Overheard my girlfriend say she would leave me for someone taller." So my girlfriend and I have been dating for almost 3 years. Last night she had some friends over after she finished work. For context, I work from home, so I only left my office to be formal and say hello, and then continued working. It was easy to hear the conversations they were having, even though my office is down the hall. I then heard my girlfriend mention that she would leave me for a taller man. Her friends made a comment on how I was a lot shorter than her ex-boyfriend. My girlfriend responded, "If only he was as tall as my ex, he'd be 10 times better. If I could find someone taller than him, I would." I guess I should mention my girlfriend is barely 4'11" in shoes. I'm 5'9". The issue is not the height, but the fact that she would leave me for something so trivial. I talked to her about it since and said she didn't mean anything by it, just that she always dated taller men. She has since apologized multiple times. Is this a red flag of any kind of things to come, or is it just me overthinking? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. I would say it is a huge red flag if your girlfriend or boyfriend is talking to her friends about leaving you to find someone better, even if it is just in theory. Anyway, update: I didn't feel the need to make an entirely different post for the update, so here it is. I left early in the morning to make sure I was not making any irrational choices. When I came back, she was immediately apologetic, but I did not want any more apologies. I talked to her about how little respect she had for me, that she felt the need to make jokes at my expense. She started crying and begging not to break up and feeding me the standard BS people say when they don't want to break up. To not bore you with the details, I broke it off. I lose nothing at this point. I should clarify though something from my initial post. I get that people can joke around and it doesn't mean anything, but when I confronted her about it, she denied it and got very defensive. That is the part that got to me, the fact that she tried to cover it up before apologizing. I read all the comments and thank you. Update to the story. So even after breaking up with my girlfriend, I was doubting if I made the right decision. I was not going to update because I didn't see a reason to do it, but after the last couple days I came to a final conclusion. I want to clarify that I broke up with my girlfriend because of how easy it was for her to disrespect me behind my back, not because of the actual height difference. After I broke up with her, she continued to apologize to me. She would send me letters and call me a lot. In one of the texts I actually responded to, she asked if we could meet up and talk. Without going into too much detail, she wanted a second chance and overall sounded very remorseful. I was about to agree, but something she said made me realize that I would be making a mistake if I did. She said, "I remember to respect from now on." That sentence made me realize that I made the right choice by breaking up. Since when do you have to be reminded to have the bare minimum of respect for your partner? Either way, I'm glad I did not give her a second chance. I don't know if any of you care at this point, but there's the update. On a side note though, the other day I was hanging out with one of my female friends who happens to be taller, and I guess she saw us and started texting me that she does not need me, started saying that my friend was a pig and that I moved on too fast. I blocked her and had a laugh. I know for a fact that I made the right choice. And the next one is a petty revenge story. Back when I was in my mid-20s, I bought my first place to live. Nothing great, it was just a trailer house, but it was mine. My neighbors were okay for the first few months, and then one day I was hearing banging on my walls. The kids on one side were using my outside wall to constantly bounce tennis balls off. It drove me nuts. I talked to the neighbor and they said, "Kids will be kids," and didn't put a stop to it. I decided it's time to do something after a few days and got a set of extremely loud air horns like they use on trains and semi-trucks. I put them under the skirting. The next time the kids started, I hooked up the air hose from my air compressor and opened the valve. The kids screamed and ran crying. I was crying from laughing so hard. The parents were pissed off and came over, making threats and yelling at me. The second petty revenge I got was one night I hid a wireless battery-powered doorbell under their stairs and I'd randomly pushed a button to ring it. Their dogs would go crazy, barking and running around. I changed the batteries, that thing, about a dozen times. I used it so much. And the last one is gonna be a funny story from r/petty revenge. It is titled Road Rage Revenge. So today I was on the highway heading out to our summer place, 2-lane highway at 9 AM, minimal traffic. We are all good. As I'm passing a rig on the highway, some idiot starts riding my bumper, like almost in my backseat. I can see him flailing his arms and yelling. My cruise control is set at 120 kilometers per hour, so it's not like I'm going slow. As he was passing the rig, he makes a dangerous swerve right in front of the truck, passes me on the inside lane, gives me the middle finger, and starts brake checking me like a total ass. But the idiot has his company's name and phone number in huge letters across his rear window. At this point, I'm pissed off, and I can be a petty a-hole too. So I called the number hoping I would get the guy driving the car. A man answered and I asked him if it was him driving like a maniac on the highway, and he said no, he was in town. I told him what the clown with his company name was doing on the highway, and the gentleman thanked me and said he would deal with it. Because the a-hole is still ahead of me, I see him answer his phone, followed by a lot of hand-waving. He then pulled into the right lane and slowed right down. As I passed him, I was laughing my rear off because it looked like the boss was tearing a strip off him. Let that be a lesson to everyone. I may look old, but I don't mind taking the time to ruin someone's day. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like the video, and I will see you again tomorrow.